250 penises are lost annually in South Africa as a result of botched circumcision rituals.
How do you become a grown-up? Is it getting a driver's license or celebrating your 18th birthday? In many African cultures, this happens through initiation ceremonies.
We saw a video featuring Ugandan politician Bobby Wine some time ago. But if you are lightheaded, better close your eyes now, because it got me thinking about the things we have to do to belong. And in Africa, they include initiation ceremonies like we see here. We even did a debate on it a while ago. So that was a public display of the Imbalu circumcision ceremony in Uganda. I mean, Rachel, they look so proud, and he looks so into it. Like he just presented himself before them like, I am here. Just do it once and for all.
I seriously did not know where to look, because like he feels very proud being part of this community. This is his identity, but you know, like it's also pain endurance, pain tolerance. I'm just wondering how he managed to even like stay still like that, you know?
I agree. That is indeed a tough one.
Welcome to the show. My name is Rachel Ndwati.
I am Fatu Eli Kamaloshi, and also follow us on our social media platforms so that we can expand this conversation on initiation or rites of passage, because as you can see, this idea of transitioning from one phase to another is such a big deal and poses this psychological fulfillment, which sort of, you know, really makes us want to understand why is it so important for us, right?
Indeed. So why is it such a big deal? Initiation rites are deeply rooted in identity, belonging, and becoming someone in the eyes of a society. That's why changing them isn't a simple yes or no.
As we discuss rites of passage today on the show, it's important to note that these are not simple rituals. They are systems of education and socialization where young male and females are introduced to ideas about sexuality, marriage, responsibility, but also courage. These will later establish their place within the community. Here is what some young people told me about their initiation experience during our Uganda debate on that subject matter. Let's start with Marian from Malawi.
My own experience was somehow traumatizing and also exciting and exhilarating, because I was so young at the time, and I was visiting my uncles in one of the districts, and we have we have people in the villages who dress as masquerades. We call them nyao, and they go around the homes, the villages, to collect kids who have not been circumcised, or they have not been accustomed to tradition. So they take these kids, take them to the mountains, circumcise them, and teach them how to be men. Traditionally, though, they never sewed. They will just circumcise you and leave you run around until you stop bleeding. You use some banana leaves or things like that until the bleeding stops and you're okay. If you survive, you're a man. If you die, you're a weak boy.
If you die, you're a weak boy.
That was like so captivating. As in, you know, you can just be walking around as a little kid and someone can just pick you up, take you to the bush or wherever, and then circumcise you. You have no say in it because you belong to the society.
And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, because this guy says, if you die, you die. So it's like measuring somebody's masculinity, because like the guy experiences pain. And because of this pain tolerance, this pain that's felt, especially in the circumcision process, many people have always tried to measure this as a form of masculinity. And that to me is frustrating.
As you mentioned in the beginning, he mentions very important points, that this is a very traumatic experience, but it's also exhilarating for them. So you see, you know that the trauma is there, but the idea that you would become a strong, brave man serves as a relief to that trauma. And that's something that the panel was also very keen on.
Now, some culture practice the labeling on the faces as a point of identity. It is initiation, okay? But why in this civilization? Why would I be identified by my iris? That is biometric. It is nice. It is okay, but it is not private. But when I'm identified by a mark on my face, it is privacy. I would advocate for this one, for the mark on my face, rather than being identified by my thumb or by my iris.
Yes, they might not be important for economic growth, but they are important to identify us as a community. We are Africans first and foremost. We still do it because it's part of who we are. We cannot remove what defines who we are just because we want to join a global community. Look at these people, even in the global community, we are going to become inferior. Look at the Americans. They disintegrated the West Indies. Now there's no trace of them.
I'm here to support that culture should stand. Okay. Culture should be monitored very well and should be embraced. For every society that believes culture is the way to go, should go on.
Culture should stand, but when culture is trying to overtake like human negligence, because for me, I don't even have a problem with culture in itself. I have a problem with human negligence. You know, when you see somebody fatu, they're bleeding to death. Yeah. They're bleeding to death, but you still want to say, oh, I'm not going to save them because at the same time, I want to see whether they're man enough or I want to see whether they're more masculine enough. This to me does not sound fair.
Problematic.
Yeah, it's so problematic.
I mean, if you look at it, culture, like you said, it's very, very important, and especially for an African, it represents this, you know, sense of identity. The culture as well somehow just sows these seeds of empathy within the community and builds the bridges that form, you know, this connection between us. So you can imagine it would be so frightening to tell someone, let it go in entirety. But of course, we can look at the different aspects that can be adapted, and eventually that will become even clearer as we go into the show. But because for us now, the question is going to be, how do we navigate, you know, both worlds? And what exactly is working now? And the females on that panel also had a different perception.
I am so curious what the female said, because I could see your face, you know, when you were asking them these questions.
Yes,
so
it was intense, right?
Absolutely.
So we can also have a look at how that debate went.
I don't believe our ancestors were so special. Yes, they had gifts, they had talents, but so do we. We came from them, no. So why don't we start something new, something healthy, something that does not involve me being in pain just to please someone else, and then call it, and then just glorifying it. Because I suffered so much, oh my God, this, but now at least I have one cup of tea. No.
These rites of passage, can they coexist with human rights?
It's going to be very hard for culture to coexist with human rights, because culture is selective when it comes to human rights.
Cultures are beautiful, but if they are harmful, I think we should do away with them. Let's maintain the good parts, sincerely speaking.
Well, as the host of that debate, I can clearly tell you that it was indeed a gender war, and that clearly speaks to a fundamental issue, because we had the women versus the men.
When you look at rites of passage, for example, from a male perspective, it's all about benefiting the man. But when you look at rites of passage from a female perspective, it's always, how are you going to please your husband?
One thing that also came out very clearly in that debate was the fact that back then, the child or the person had no consent. You belonged to the society, and the society could do with you what they wanted. But now times have changed, and we know that children have rights, and those rights include them being able to make decisions about their lives. Then they should be able to choose. Because right now we have a situation in South Africa where someone did not want to go through this particular initiation ceremony, and he in fact did go through it, and now he is in a very traumatic phase in his life.
South Africa, close to the Vaal River. Early in the morning, these initiation students practice traditional chants. These schools are infamous for their allegedly brutal methods, but this young initiate shows no signs of fear.
Some guys are scared, but that's only because other people exaggerate things. So, some have this fear. But because this is our culture, I fear nothing. I feel like most of the boys here have to go through it.
The traditional Xhosa, Ndebele, and Pede ethnic groups believe a boy can only become a man if he goes through the rites of passage, like chanting, stick fighting, and hunting. The rite of passage culminates with the circumcision of the students, performed in an open field by a traditional healer. While only a minority of the schools are accused of mistreating their students, many push questionable ideas about masculinity.
Because once you come from this place, you cannot cry. It's like if someone you love have passed away, or even if you feel pain, it's like here we're transforming, like turning a little bit to be a soldier.
Attitudes like this made this young man's experience all the more painful. At the age of 18, Xolani, a Xhosa, was sent by his father to an initiation school. As soon as he arrived, he and his cousin were subjected to daily beatings. But Xolani's cousin was a proud young man and defied the humiliations. One evening, the elders took him away once again to teach him a lesson. This time, he never returned.
My cousin never came back because he was a fighter. You know, he was one person that could stand up for himself. So I felt like They beat him to a point whereby they killed him. And when they realized that they'd gone too far, then they just came back and then acted like nothing happened.
The initiation schools aren't registered or monitored. Much like female genital mutilation, initiates can also die as a result of botched circumcisions, traditionally known as ulwaluko, or lose one's manhood forever. When Xolani asked about the whereabouts of his cousin, one of the elders threatened him with the same fate. Xolani knew then that he had to flee, but his decision brought disgrace on his family, and he's too scared to go back to his community. Today, years after the ordeal, he still lives far from his village and has no contact with his parents.
I've been in a lot of fights. I actually have scars, even this one. Like you constantly have to prove yourself as a man. And I don't think that will end until I get that confirmation from my father.
That is really interesting. You know, Fatu, I was doing my research and I realized that in Southern Africa, it's a really big thing. Like circumcision, the rites of passage from childhood to manhood in South Africa is really big. And even the Cultural Commission said that 700 people die in the last decade died because they experienced, botched circumcisions.
I tell you what, I realized that 250 penises are lost annually in South Africa as a result of botched circumcision rituals like we're seeing just now. So it goes to show that South Africa is also one of the countries with the greatest need for penile transplants. Can you imagine? And that is because they have, certain illegitimate schools that are still doing the circumcision ceremonies. South Africa is trying to regulate this area, and they have legal schools that can definitely do this. But the illegal ones are also there. So if you must do it in the ritual way because you don't want to go to the hospital because it poses no traditional or cultural significance, maybe it's important to regulate it and do it the right way.
Yeah, and we've even had stories of men who felt they're not man enough simply because they went to the hospital to go through circumcision the normal way. And they're even ridiculed in school. Seriously, they're ridiculed in school. They experience a lot of bullying simply because they did not go into the forest and experience this circumcision.
But it's also not just for men, because even women in the African society barely have a choice in their lives. And we would also, of course, look at what happened in Kenya there, because Edith was also in the Maasai community, right?
Yeah, exactly. Edith was in this Maasai community where she asked this guy, what does he think with regards to gender-based violence, especially in terms of circumcision, female circumcision?
Because you said that it is cultural, you would not marry a woman unless she was cut. Tunasema kutairi wanawake ni mila ya Kimasai. Lakini kuna mila zingine ambazo Wamasai wamewacha nyuma, kama kuua simba. Bado mnaua simba kama Wamorani nyinyi? Kwa hiyo mbona mnataka wanawake waendelee kukatwa na Wamorani? Kuna vitu zingine wameacha nyuma.
Hata hiyo mnaitaje? Kukeketa. Hata hiyo bado tunaacha.
That is interesting. Even the guy himself struggles to pronounce this word, which means that they don't, even in this culture, they don't have the exact word to name the problem.
I mean, so in that case, should we degender the rites of passage to translate into more meaningful participation, free of bodily harm? Because the female initiation involves the notable female genital mutilation, which is considered a harmful traditional practice by all international standards. And of course, countries have gone on to domesticate this as well. But some communities still find it difficult to abandon the culture of their ancestors. So let's hear from the Maasai women there in Kenya.
I think for me, my mom, of course, she wanted me to grow up like a normal Maasai girl child. Because my grandma was a cutter, I used to go to watch many girls being circumcised. So it was such a traumatic experience for me. And I kept telling my mom that it's something I never want to go through. So she didn't think that my decision or my choice counted. So she went ahead and decided for me. They even planned a surprise ceremony. And upon coming home from visiting my uncle, everything was set. And I found a group of women, and they just locked me in and forced me into it. It's something that has been kind of disturbing me for a long time, and sometimes she would talk to her fellow friends about it as a superhero story. Like I trapped her, she didn't know, she didn't like it. So I decided okay, well, I think it's time to part ways with my mom. After 10 years of thinking about it, I approached her and told her. Then I was like, okay, you have the society, you made them happy, I'm gone.
So Mama Leposo, we've just heard from your daughter that you forced her to get FGM. Why did you do that? So you mean to tell me that if there was no law against FGM, you would still practice it?
Kama serikali hakuna, inaendelea. Hakuna mzee ya Maasai kijana anataka msijana. Sisi naita msijana. Hapa naita mama. Hata kama angesa 10 na hajatairi. Nasema tu mtoto ama msijana.
Just looking at her, I can tell she really does not care.
Yeah, it's not even about caring. It's more about like what, you know, this act brings to her. Because she said in the last line, she said that no Maasai man would actually take a Maasai woman if she's not circumcised. You know, and we have to talk about the role that women play, especially in female genital mutilation.
It's important to also point out that FGM is done globally.
Yes.
But in Africa, we have 100 million girls and women who have undergone the practice as we speak. And you can imagine in the African context, for example, your mother really does not care what you think. For them, the culture is the bedrock of survival and existence.
Yes.
So it's about, this is what we're supposed to do. If we don't do it, what would the community think?
It's not also just because of what the community might think, but it's also more like what this FGM means for this community. For example, in the Maasai community, you know, FGM makes the dowry more. So like, for example, if a Maasai woman experiences FGM, then it means more cows. It means more prosperity in the community. So this woman is expected to carry that load for the whole community.
And you see this case of men being taught to be their own responsible adults. Women are just being taught to please men. This gendered approach to female circumcision basically, you know, questions the role of women in society. How do we train them to become their own responsible adults?
But also young women and girls are getting educated. They're getting, you know, solutions to these problems. And Fatu, you also did another interview where you interacted with Zainab. And there's a surgical operation that's called clitoral reconstruction. It's meant to restore sensation, but also reveals the part of the female genitalia that was buried inside during the act of FGM.
Yes, and Zainab really did give me the details because she's also Miss World Somalia 2025. She went through the practice as well at the age of 7 and now lives in the UK. But she's also using her platform now to shape the fate of young Somali girls. And when I spoke to her some months ago, she told me she plans to undergo this very clitoral reconstruction. And I was just curious to know what led her to this moment. How would you describe what happened? What did you see and how did you feel in that moment?
On that specific day, I remember my mom was not there. Like, it seemed like she was like, you know, saying she was running errands and stuff, but she was nowhere to be seen the whole day. So I remember just being taken into a room where 3 women waited, and they were sat there, like they just had all the equipment out, like, you know, scissors, blades, and just old tools. As a child, like, all I remember is just like the pain, and it was so vivid. Like, I just kept screaming, kept crying, and then at times I would just go silent.
Now you're planning to do the clitoral reconstruction. Yes. What made you want to do this?
Once I, you know, discovered that there is a clitoral reconstruction surgery for survivors, it gave me hope, and it made me realize there are so many girls like me. Probably they don't even know that they have this opportunity where they can go and reclaim a part of their life back and some part of their body too. And I was like, this is going to give them so much hope. And I've always wanted to do it, but I feel like I'm mentally, physically preparing because it brings back so many triggers. I know this time around, like, I'm going back and I'm laying down on a table, but I'm safe and it's for the right reasons.
Wow, what a magnetic woman. Her energy is quite interesting. I can imagine how you also felt like when you were talking to her.
Of course, FGM is also done in the Gambia. We have a rate of 70%. So you can imagine, this was something that I was also very passionate about. And for her, it's more like a trauma, just trauma response and just healing, and from this painful moment of her life, processing that trauma. And she feels like the surgery would help restore back what was taken away. And of course, it's important to point out that like any surgical operation, there is not 100% guarantee of this procedure, but 90% of it has been successful. And even though there's no guarantee of a restored sensation, most women that did it say that they were able to claim back their lives. And I think that's the most important thing. We should listen to people and really understand what they want.
Yeah, because I can imagine somebody who has experienced such a traumatic event, even being able to, survive in a marriage, for example, where she can't experience pleasure, and being able to also like be part of something, something that's magnetic. And we can't say that FGM really strips women of their dignity. But also it's a human rights violation issue. And, a community in Kenya may have come to a solution with regards to seeking alternative rites of passage.
In Kenya's Maasai lands, countless generations of girls have been subjected to female genital mutilation, or FGM. It's a long-standing tradition in Maasai communities and is usually performed at the onset of puberty. But the practice is inherently harmful, as survivors like Grace Salonek can attest. The 26-year-old mother of 3 from Oiti village underwent the cut when she was just 10 years old.
We are 7 girls from my neighbors and my cousins. We are all brought together, put in one place, my mother's house. The mother was going to do that, so it was very prepared. It was on 6 a.m., very early in the morning.
Many women who have undergone FGM suffer from heavy bleeding and infections, as well as complications during pregnancy. But FGM could soon become a thing of the past here. Over 400 girls from this Maasai community in Kajiado County have come together to undertake the so-called alternative rite of passage without FGM. Denge Lugayu from NGO Amref, who is Maasai himself, hopes the community will adopt this ritual permanently.
The community said they are ready for community-led alternative rites of passage. You pass through all the steps which they normally follow in terms when they do the circumcision of girls. But we tell them, let's do all these other beautiful cultural things we do when we celebrate our girls' passage into womanhood, but leave out the cut.
Even though the practice is outlawed, the risk of these girls being forced to undergo FGM is still very real. They're encouraged to report any threats or incidents when they go back home.
When I go back home, I will tell my peers to reject FGM and early marriages.
The girls also learn about the risks of an early marriage, teenage pregnancy, and children's rights. As they embark on their path to womanhood, they light candles as they look forward to a brighter future.
You can imagine that in the African community, it's like love manifests through strict discipline. So your parents put you through all of these things because for them, it's just the way life is supposed to be so that you are trained to become a responsible adult rather.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see that people can now say for themselves that we are okay with the initiation or rites of passage. That is to say, teach women other things that make them responsible. What can you teach them? Hygiene, reproductive health, economic independence.
Consent.
And do away with bodily harm or female genital mutilation. It's
Absolutely.
possible.
And we also have to look at the role civil society gets to play. For example, in Kenya, the Pentecostal church decided to tell people, instead of taking those men to the forest, let's bring them here in the churches together with the hospitals and try to educate these men. If you look at Uganda, for example, they have like a prohibition of female genital mutilation act that makes sure that these people who perpetrate these things are actually put to jail.
Yeah, I think the core of the initiation camp in itself is to groom you to become a responsible adult. So once that is done in the most peaceful way possible, I think it should be appreciated by everyone.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we have to decide for ourselves as Africans, going forward, what do we want,
And make culture go ahead with the times, because sometimes I feel like, you know, we're stuck in this phase where we do want to embrace our culture, but yes, we're also having, you know, human negligence at some point where lives are getting lost. People are dying because they're trying to follow certain cultures.
Yeah, but you see, even messengers were sent for a particular time and presented solutions based on the problems of those times. So I feel like as we progress, things change and we should adapt. And it's not to say that we have to do away with our culture, because it is what makes us who we are.
Absolutely.
But if we must transform it, then we should be able to do that with intention.
Exactly.
And I think we've come to the end of the show, Rachel.
Indeed, we have come to the end of our show, but this is not a goodbye, but see you later. You know where to find us on our social media platforms at the 77% on Instagram, on TikTok. Go to our shows on YouTube. You can watch us there as well.
Yes, exactly. Do that. And we will be back again for another interesting conversation like we like to do. My name is Fatu Elikamuloshi.
And I've been yours and only the N to the D to the A to the T to the I, Rachel Ndwati.
Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.